What's up, guys? Today we're going to change out the water pump, timing belt, and the crank and cam seals on Chris's CRX. We're going to go through the procedure. It might be a little bit different for US models though, of course, because this does have the power steering and some of these lines are just a little different as a US model. The AC lines don't necessarily come this way, but essentially it'll be the same. Once we get all these components removed, these aren't really that difficult to remove anyway. Once we get those removed, we'll start tackling the gist of it inside the engine itself. Now, if you're curious here, Chris's CRX is a 91 EF8. It's actually a JDM model that he bought. He bought it a year ago, around 2021? Yeah. He bought it around a year ago. He's been adding little things here and there. Some function and form, coilovers, put on, actually the Mugen wheels came with the car. He just put on the Toyo Proxy tires. And what he wants to do now is essentially, timing belt water pump I think is one of the main things you always want to do, just to make sure it doesn't snap. And he doesn't know if it's ever been changed, and obviously it's 31 years old potentially, so it's just, even though mileage might not be there, it's probably time to get it changed. According to kilometers, 97,000, so like 60-ish thousand miles. But still, it could be potentially really, really old timing belt, and it's just one of those peace of mind things that we're gonna work on today. First off, what you wanna do is remove your valve cover. Any 10 millimeters, remove the ground wires. Just get that removed. Very easy to get the valve cover taken off. With the valve cover off, I was telling Chris what we need to do next. We're going to rotate the engine. We're going to get it to top dead center. That way the crank is already set up. And same with the cam gears when we reinstall the new timing belt.
It kind of looks like it has lines in it already too.
It's probably old. We'll see if it's original. What Chris is doing here is going to remove some of these components because we're trying to line up the car to top dead center, but it's hard for us to see his crank pulley because of these lines for the power steering. It's just kind of in the way here where the little mark is. So he's going to remove those really quickly and we'll get it set up. So for his car, we had to remove the power steering out of the way. Basically on the power steering you have two bolts which attach it to the brackets as well, and then there's a tensioner bolt here on top for this particular car. Your car may or may not have that. Now we're working on the AC compressor. So this one has this little 12 millimeter nut attached to this little threaded stock right here. And then we need to loosen up the 14 millimeter nut on the pulley right here, and that will slide this down and we can get the AC compressor belt removed. And then at that point we'll be able to easily see, here's that mark. Where's it at? It's down here a little farther for a B series timing. We need to line up this mark with the crank pulley. Now for this particular engine, you'll see on the left side there's a little dash on the plastic cover. Right now it's pointing to that third mark on the crank pulley. Now that's for distributor timing when we're doing the ignition timing. Now to the rear, you'll see that one single mark. We need to keep spinning it a little bit more so that single mark is lined up with that mark on the valve cover, the timing cover. You can see it right there. And when we do that, you're gonna see here, there's gonna be two marks on the exhaust and intake gears. They're gonna line up. So I'm gonna have him move the crank pulley a little bit more. I'll show you exactly how those line up. Alright, so here we go. We have the little dash on the cover. It's lined up with that single mark. And then you'll see here on the cam gears, these two little dashes now match each other, and both of these are facing up. And when they face up, they actually face up and to the left just a little bit. So I'll let you know they're perfectly lined up where we need them to be. There's this cool tool they make for B series VTEC. Now if you want to check if it's lined up correctly, this tool fits perfectly on there. Chris brought his own, I have mine also. I'll let you know it's perfectly lined up. We did that just to check, but now we're going to remove it because we're going to also we're pulling off his cam gears. This will allow us to do so at this point also without them spinning. And we're going to change the seals behind here. Now we're going to take off the alternator belt. So up here we have a 12mm nut on top of the alternator. And down here you should have a 14mm nut that loosens up the bolt that secures it. Once you remove the nut on the bottom and top, you'll be able to now loosen the tension off the belt and you can slide the belt off. Chris is loosening them up. I said remove, but you don't necessarily have to remove them. Once they're both loose, you actually remove any sort of tension on the bolts, and then the alternator will come forward. The alternator belt pulled off, we are going to remove the crank pulley next. 19mm. Best thing to probably use is some sort of impact gun. And let's see if we can get that taken off. On there, huh?
Mallet, or?
I do. It's on there, huh?
Feels a little looser.
It looks like it came out a little bit. So sometimes you have to play around with this. We're using a little rubber mallet. Obviously we don't want to damage the crank pulley. See if we can just get it loose. And looks like it came out a little more there, huh? You want some I guess you might have gotten it. You want some WD-40?
Yeah.
Grab it, it's up there. Yeah, so you can bend it. So you're just gonna spray the crank inside of the pulley itself along the crank, see if that helps loosen it up. Sucker's on. That's going though, I can see it.
There it goes.
There we go. Cool.
Oh shit.
It's oily, huh? What
Look
is
at
it
the
also?
gasket. Look at the gasket.
Is it popped out?
Or wait, what is that? No, that's not the gasket.
Oh no,
right?
yeah, I was gonna say. That's just the gear itself.
I
It's like I can't see with them looking through the camera.
It doesn't look good.
Cool.
Alright.
Alright, so crank pulley now removed. What we're gonna do, I'm actually gonna have him remove this AC tensioner bracket. You have two 12mm bolts. We need that out of the way so we can remove the lower timing cover. And then we're gonna support the engine with a jack and some wood. Then we're gonna take off this motor mount. That way we have full access to everything here. We can get everything knocked out. Hardest part so far has been removing this lower tensioner bolt. This one is so close to the AC compressor pulley that we couldn't get a normal 12 in there. So I went ahead and had a cheap wrench. I took my grinder to it and made it a little bit thinner on the head, so it was able to slide in there. We were able to get that loose. You can't fit a socket in there, so that was our alternative to getting that thing loose. So with the bottom bolt loosened up, we took the pulley off of the AC tensioner. Now we can slide it out of the way, and we're gonna go ahead and remove lower timing cover. You have a handful of 10mm bolts. I think it's like 4 around the edges of it. And then you have one right here in the center of the timing cover. With the timing cover removed, we now have access to everything. I'm gonna have him remove the motor mount, because obviously we can't get the new belt on without removing that. You can get the old one off by cutting it, but we need to reinstall the new one. We're gonna pull off little cover for the gear and have him unloosen the tension for the belt. That's a 14mm bolt on the tensioner. And then he can go ahead and remove the cam gears at the same time. We're going to change out all the seals first. Mount removed, tensioner removed, slid the belt off. Now I can go ahead and pull it out. Now we're going to change the seals, so he's going to remove the cam gears, 14mm there. For the lower crank seal, you can just slide off this gear, and then there's another big washer there. We can change that seal. But once we have this removed and the seal's done, I think it's probably easier to remove this little plastic cover again to get to the water pump. And then there's 4 10mm bolts that hold the water pump to the engine.
The whole motor moved.
I saw that. It's because we've been missing the mount though too.
True.
Another thing that we had done, we put the 2 screwdrivers in to kind of lock the cams into place. I don't necessarily think it's a bad idea to use those, so if you have some, throw those in there as well.
The D series one have one?
The D series I think does also.
Oh, okay.
These have little Woodruff keys also, so
Just be careful.
yeah, just can't keep an eye on them. I have extras, but still. It might stay on the cam itself.
Okay.
Yeah. Since they labeled them. Whoever owned this car before us, they had actually labeled them intake and exhaust. Honestly, I don't know if it matters because they both are stamped PR3. I think they potentially might be able to be interchangeable. Regardless, we're going to still keep them where they're set at already. So now that he has that removed, I think it'll just be easier to remove this. You have a 10mm bolt right there. That's the only one because when we removed this one earlier, it's going to come off now. It'll just be easier to change both of the cam seals. It's gone up 10 degrees in the last hour and a half.
It has?
It was 70, now it's 80.
The good thing is that we're outside, so you don't really feel it.
I'm gonna focus on it right now.
You just kind of get used to it as it goes.
Agreed. And so, if you look here, this one actually is wet on the bottom of it, so obviously in need of replacing. Might be the original. The exhaust one looks like it might be okay. So we usually use like a screwdriver, some picks. Just don't mar this surface. If you're prying in, make sure you lift towards the gasket itself. That way, because you're tearing that up anyways, doesn't matter. We just don't want to nick the surface of the cams. With that cover also removed, it's a lot easier to get to the water pump now because the piece of it is covering right here and it's covering these 2 top bolts on the water pump. There you go. When I was explaining to Chris, this is his first time changing out these cam seals with the motor in the car, is like if you put the screwdriver on this outside lip and pry in, just of course don't go deep enough that you scar the inside. You should be able to usually catch the seal and pull it out. Like a little bit of scarring here on the very edge is going to be fine. It's never going to affect it because the seal is always going to slide in further than that. We just don't want to damage any of the cam where the seal potentially lines up with it, or the little cam holders itself, or the head. Now we're just using a screwdriver and rag, clean up some of the residual oil before we go and install the new seals. Now we're going to go install those really quickly before removing the lower crank seal. Go for it. We can use a little extension and
Chop them in.
yeah, that's good though.
With that.
Okay. What I was explaining to Chris is like put it on, you can kind of spin and push a little bit. That way you don't catch the inner lip and the little spring comes off the rubber part. And then from there we can use, I usually use a little extension. I don't have a seal installer, an extension. We just kind of tap and go around and even it out as we push it in. You don't want to sink these in all the way, of course. Once you reach the inner lip, you want them in maybe like another 1/16 of an inch off of that. So this is exactly how we're going to install them.
So then just kind of tap them in.
There you go. I just don't tap all at one side at one time. Like do a little bit here, a little bit there. You can use the other hammer as well. It doesn't have to be the rubber one. Yeah, since we're not hitting. Just don't hit too hard since it is a seal and you use that little metal. Just want to keep pushing in just a little bit here and there. There you go. Go to the like, exact opposite side now. There you go. With the top seals done, we're going to remove the gear on the crank, and then also there's a little washer. And then that seal is now present. You can see this one is dry, so it looks like it hasn't leaked. Regardless, we're still going to replace it and do the same process as we did with the cam seals. With both seals installed, we're not draining the coolant because obviously when we remove the water pump, it's going to make a huge mess if you don't. So once that finishes up, we're going to go ahead and remove the water pump, clean up any residual fluid that leaks there, and then just reinstall it. These are torqued at, I believe, 7.2 foot-pounds of torque. I'll double check it right now if I'm incorrect. I'll leave that description in the video right here as well. Here it goes for the timing cover, and then just pry right there.
The pry bar or just
Use the pry bar.
Where do you get it?
I put them right here. This one should be long enough.
Put it here?
Yeah, put it right here. Like
Right
edge
there.
it.
Okay.
That's what I would do. There you go. With that removed, we were looking at it, and you have 2 longer bolts and then 3 shorter bolts. The longer ones go here on the bottom, the very bottom, and then the top right. Then the other 3 for the short bolts. That way if you're ever putting it back together and you're curious. Looks like this was probably an original water pump on the car. Looks like it's in really nice shape too. There's really no corrosion. Chris ended up getting a Gates setup, and we were looking at the dowel pins. It doesn't look like the dowel pins were included in the new one. I always explained to him that once you get a bolt started, you shouldn't have an issue getting it lined up correctly. These dowel pins also, there's an edge in there, you can see where it would catch, so I told him it's also, I don't recommend swapping it over to here because it might just slide all the way through and not actually catch. Let me see if you can see that little lip in there. It's hard to tell, but there's a spot where the dowel pins stop. Another thing I like to do is add, like these gaskets fall off relatively easily just by me shaking it. What I'm gonna do and tell him, we're gonna put a little bit of RTV in here just to put the gasket in there, and the only reason we're doing that is to hold the gasket in place so it doesn't slip off while we're installing the water pump, and then if we tighten it, we couldn't see where it slipped off. It's just gonna create a massive water leak once we get the car put back together. So what I like to do is just put a little dab on each corner, go ahead and apply the gasket next, and then we're gonna clean up any of the residual on the outside. And then it should be good to go. It's not going to move anywhere, and it'll form a nice solid seal without it potentially coming out.
Like shit.
It was just, luckily it was just a CRX with just didn't have power steering or
anything.
the AC hooked up at the time, so it just had the alternator, so it's a lot easier on a stock CRX. Go ahead and reinstall it. Here's your bolts.
Okay. So one at a time, huh?
Yeah. That's a shorter one.
Yes.
There we go. Yeah, it is. I got the 2 long ones here at the corner.
Okay. All right.
Put the pump on. What we're going to work on next, he's going to put on the plastic inner timing cover. Then we're going to do the cam gears. Then we're going to work our way down to the tensioner. And then the crank, the gear. And then we're going to put the belt on and get it timed. Then we start slowly buttoning everything else back up.
Yeah.
Now we're just putting on, well, Chris is putting on the gears. I'm recording. Once we put the gears back on, we'll actually put back on that little tool to hold them in place when we attempt to get the car timed with the belt. And then, since he has those on, the tool in place, he can now torque those to spec, which I cannot remember what it is. I'll try to include it in the video here. With the gears on, we're moving on to the tensioner, only because it's just next down the engine. This side goes to the little spring. It's going to attach to, there's a little knob that sticks out on the motor. You'll see it, it's right down there. I'm sorry?
Does it go on the inside or the outside of the spring?
It doesn't matter. The way it wraps around it, no, it doesn't matter. And then this side, the right side of the tensioner, there's another little knob that it slides onto, and that's what holds it in place, and the spring kind of tensions it while we get the bolt in and get it ready to be tensioned with the belt. Tensioner on, now slide on the inner washer and then the gear, and then we can work on getting the belt installed. This is where having the mount removed, drop the timing belt in. He has the lower gear installed, so we'll slide it around there. Try to slide around the tensioner and then try to slide the belt up over the cam gears. It's always easiest to start by putting the belt on the bottom, hit up the tensioner next, around the water pump, and then hopefully here on top, squeeze it over the cam gears. A little bit of stretching, a little bit of pulling. Looks like he almost has it. There it is. Okay. Great, belt is on. Now that everything's on, what we're gonna do, we're gonna tighten the tensioner for now just to help remove any slack. We're gonna install the lower cover, and then we're gonna install the crank pulley. And then we're gonna remove this and we're gonna check timing. And we can just now, and at this point you can go ahead and rotate it a few times. Make sure your timing is on point. If not, you can always loosen up your tensioner, slide off the belt. Even with the lower cover on, you can still slide off the belt. And then get it set to where it should be. Ours should be set. We have a little bit of slack here that we want to get removed. Obviously when we tighten that, it'll help remove it. So we're gonna get all that installed now. So we got the lower cover put on. Next, we went ahead and put the AC tensioner bracket back on, because with the crank pulling the way, I think it would have been a little bit more difficult getting to the bolts. So we got those tightened back up. We had to use our tool that we had kind of cut earlier, so that's sitting right. Now we're gonna put on the other gear. Don't forget your Woodruff key and the crank pulley. More. Good. Remove your screwdrivers if you still had some in there. Last thing you want to do is snap those in there. You can remove the tool for the cam gears. And we already tightened up the tensioner. So what he's going to do is crank it a couple times. We're just going to check, make sure everything lines up, and then if it does, your timing is set to go. With timing set, now it's just a matter of getting all the belts installed. Of course, we're gonna do alternator first, work on the AC compressor, and then we're gonna do the power steering. We haven't put the mount back on yet, only because it's really easy to install that. And we just wanted to have a little bit more room for our hands while trying to put the belts on. Doing the alternator belt's pretty easy. First, get the belt on. Then I'm using a pry bar. You can use that to tension it. And then tighten up your top 12mm nut on the end here. And once that's tightened and the belt's tensioned, go ahead and tighten up the 14mm nut on the bottom of the alternator bolt. Next up is AC compressor. Getting the belt put on. Once that's on, you can tighten up the 12mm nut right there, and that'll tension the belt. Once you're at a specified tension that you like, go ahead and tighten the 14mm nut on the outside of the pulley itself. That'll lock it all into place. So we got all the belts on, reinstalled the motor mount, pretty straightforward. He's just putting on the top timing cover, and then we're gonna finish installing, well, power steering pump, I'm sorry. And then what else do we have to do here? Nothing, just the lines. AC lines, everything we disconnected here. Kind of got ahead of myself. Then we're just gonna change the spark plugs. He has Newport spark plugs, and put the valve cover on. Go for it. It's that smoke from the spark plugs that fell, the oil that fell on the spark plug. And that wraps up this B-Series VTEC timing belt / water pump job. Hopefully that helps you out. I think we covered essentially everything that was necessary. If you have any questions, leave them below in the comments. If you have anything to add that may be beneficial to add for someone else in the future, leave it in the comments as well. I'd love to have as much information possible for anyone that's attempting to do this job that may have never attempted it before or just wants to learn something new. And as the last clip, here is a shot of Chris's 91 CRX EF8. Obviously the right-hand drive model. He has the Mugen MR5 wheels. He recently had these powder coated, the gloss black lip, matte black face, all of the caps for the wheels. Interior is just all stock, with the exception of a hybrid racing shift knob and collar. Has an access steering wheel, one of the options. But a real sharp looking example of it. Has this 5-zig exhaust. We were checking it out. It sounds solid. It sounds like it has a leak somewhere. Get that repaired. Be a little bit quieter. But overall, just a pretty badass CRX. You guys saw the engine bay while we were doing the timing belt water pump, just essentially stock. But that concludes today's video, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed the walk around here at the end. We'll talk to you guys soon. Take care.